The cognitive load was getting too big for my brain to deal with.
We had a bit of a problem last night. We were a team of 3 up until last night.
Not just sick in my mouth, I was actually had to stop swimming and was really sick. The frustrations with the support crew started to begin inside me. I wanted the person that was in the overall lead to see me on the road. This meant my intensity was higher, which meant I was more stressed, which meant that I took it out on the crew more. I wanted to get out of Lake first, get out on the bike and get out of sight. You would think that the last day came with a feeling of relief, but it didn't.
Are you coming to Ironman Wales? What on earth is next?
Okay, yeah, so have I ever told you about the time that I won the Brutal Deca? I'm James Simpson, better known on TriathlonDan's YouTube channel as Triple Brutal James. I am going to tell you all about, a couple of weeks ago I did the UK Deca, which is an Ironman a day for 10 consecutive days, which was held at Allerthorpe Leisure Park near York. I was supported by some amazing people who were physically there, like my support crew, but also everybody in my hometown who was interested in how I was going, and I'd just like to tell you all about it. Right, okay, so how nervous was I before the start? The day before, I was, I suppose, as nervous as you are before any race. Training had gone pretty well. I had a really good support crew in place. But obviously I had a massive challenge ahead of me. But I never felt overwhelmed by what I had to do because I was there now, so I better just get on with it. And obviously the day that it was due to start was the day of the hottest day in history on the planet. The event organisers had decided to change the format slightly on the first day, which was basically swapped from a full Ironman to a full Iron swim and then a half Iron bike and run, and we would make the mileage up on the next few days. The truth is these changes didn't affect me at all. I was there to do the event however it was presented, and I didn't even really give it a thought. I mean, I was relieved that we weren't doing something that I would consider unreasonably dangerous on a day as hot as it was supposed to be. I noticed at the race briefing that some of my fellow competitors were, I think, disappointed that they weren't doing a full Iron on the first day. And I think that gave me a little bit of confidence that I had a better headspace going in that I knew that it was this event however it was presented to me, and I just had to get through it, and I didn't feel at all robbed. You know, I knew that the distances would be made up, and you just have to get on with whatever's presented for you. The other thing I noticed the day before was that I was spending a lot of time sat in the shade, and my support crew were basically fetching me drinks and were putting up the tents around me, and I noticed that some of my fellow competitors were perhaps doing some light exercise, and obviously I thought, well, it is ridiculously hot and nothing is going to be gained from doing any exercise the day before. So I personally at first worried that I wasn't doing the same as my competitors, and then I realised that, well, I have to do what I think's right, and I thought it was right to rest the day before the largest physical challenge that I have faced so far. Day one. So day one started with a swim, like all good triathlons, and what I noticed is I had the pre-race butterflies that you have at the side of the lake on any triathlon. They don't seem to diminish or change with whatever type of triathlon it is. I think everybody gets pre-race nerves at that swim start. And the swim on the first day felt slow to me, and that was something that continued for quite a few days, and something that for some obscure reason I was concerned about. I mean, I'm a pretty good swimmer, and what tends to happen is I'll set off at a pace, and if that pace feels okay, I'll just stay at it. I'll never try and lift it. And I think maybe I just set off very wary of what was ahead of me, so just set off slowly and kept at that pace. This was the day that I went wrong on the first bike loop of the entire Deca. So what I did is I missed a course marker and carried on. I think I did something like 8 miles extra on that day. Again, it was definitely my fault. At first I thought a marker had been moved, but when I looked at it on subsequent laps, I realised it definitely wasn't. I'd just missed a marker and gone straight on when I should have turned left. Totally my fault, but in no way, shape or form did it concern me, because I thought, well, 8 miles onto a 1,180 mile bike ride is neither here nor there, and I wasn't going to finish any tireder because of it. So again, I just put it out of my mind and got on with it. And today we concentrated a great deal on hydration. I ate enough today, but it was very, very difficult because of the heat. But we concentrated on hydration. I think that was a really good thing to do. And this was the day that one of my fellow competitors, Dave Clamp, who's a bit of a hero to me in the Deca world, I think he is still current double Deca world record holder. His shoes had got locked in his car, so on the run he had to borrow the shoes of one of my support crew, Sam from Total Endurance Nutrition. And I think that actually sums up what competing in a Deca is like. So no matter what is thrown at you, you have to keep going because it's such a long way, and if you stop, you're in trouble. So the fact that Dave couldn't put his own shoes on and had to put somebody else's shoes on, I bet that didn't even really register with him. Now, understanding what Decas are like, I understand that all those things are sort of inconsequential. You just have to get on with moving forward, otherwise you'll never get there. Okay, so pretty quick in this day, I started to realise the importance of nutrition, and I started to realise that as I got tireder, I wouldn't really be able to necessarily be involved in the preparation or picking of a selection of food. I was just too focused on what I was doing, so I needed to be presented with things, almost as if my faculties were being condensed onto one particular thing, I think, keeping going. And so my support crew were going to become basically the be all and end all of me finishing this, I think, really, because I had to focus on what I was doing. So when it came to nutrition, they had to offer me the things. I mean, I think this day we discovered that eating out of a small bowl for some reason made it easier for me to eat more often. So we were learning lessons on day one straight away. And basically I completed day one in 8 hours. What would have happened if they'd left the distances alone? Part of me wants to say that that would have played to my strengths, in that it would have been a really tough day at the office, and that's something that sometimes I can enjoy. But I do actually think that the event organisers made the right decision, because it was extreme in nature, and I actually think there would have been illnesses and injuries, and I think people would have dropped out of the race sooner, and I think that would have spoilt the whole event. So I think the cutting the race short on day one was a very, very sensible thing to do, and that's another reason why I would always use Brutal events for any race I wanted to do, because they're just very, very straightforward and reliable and sensible, and they help you to do very difficult things, but they don't put you in a pickle. So thank you, Brutal events. Right, day two. Already I'd started to settle into a routine, so the chatting with TriathlonDan on the walk to the swim start was already becoming a pleasant part of my day. So it was a way of having a bit of a laugh, talking about fundraising, which became increasingly important motivation to me as the day went along, in a very relaxed way, and it filled that 5-minute walk that could have been filled with angst. So that became a very important thing. When it came to the swim, again, the swim felt slow to me. I was consuming 2 gels in the swim, for any of you nutritional people with a nutritional interest. That meant that I didn't have an hour and a half in the day where I wasn't consuming some calories while burning them. So I had 2 SIS gels during the swim. And already by day 2, I'd started to notice that riding a time trial bike felt cumbersome. The course was flat, and you'd think that it would be ideal for a time trial bike, but I just started to notice how much time I was spending out of the time trial position, and how much time my fellow competitors were spending out of the time trial position as well. And obviously some of these on the road were people doing the continuous, actually, so they had very good reason to be out of the time trial position. But it just started to bring home to me that sometimes the fastest position isn't the fastest position, if you see what I mean. And I just started to think about it. So we tried both bikes today, and what I was really looking for was a sustainable aero-ish position. We were quick in T2, and this is something that happened every day for me. As soon as I was off the bike, I would be quickly washed, changed into running kit and gone. And part of that was the fact that I knew I wasn't good enough to stop and mess about in T2. And the other thing is, I just think it's good practice, isn't it? If you're in a race, you want to be, particularly a triathlon race, you know, we all know that transition is one of the disciplines, and I tried to keep that thought in my mind that let's get ready, let's get out on the run, and then I'm not hanging around waiting to do something which is horrible, which is basically run just over a marathon, is never pleasant, and so I wanted to be getting on with it. So my T2 was very quick, and always was. Again, we went with little bowl for eating, which again seems to make a massive difference, just less over-phasing with the portions. And I'd already noticed that we were making the miles up on the run, so we were running just under 30 miles, and I was very aware that that was an ultra run, not a marathon. What that means in my head is that you approach an ultra run different to a marathon. You have to be shuffling and moving forward at all times. So my friend Big Paul from Sutton and Ashfield Harriers, he taught me early on in my ultra career that people like me and him aren't good enough to stop. So we have to keep moving, and you want to waylay walking as long as humanly possible. Stumbling, falling, shuffling forward are all quicker than walking. And so long as your heart rate remains low, that is the most efficient way of getting around big distances. So I think my experience played a part in that. The time for this day was just under 15 hours, so 14:58. And this was the day that I think Jen and Harvey from Total Endurance Nutrition, they arrived toward the end of today, I think, and they were with us when we had our pizza, which we had round the van when I'd completed. And as I was eating the pizza, it didn't feel like it was the right thing to do. And now as I look back in my mind's eye, I can see that for Jen and Harvey from Total Endurance Nutrition, they didn't think it was the right thing to do either, and we'll see how that plays out tomorrow. Day 3 was probably the toughest day of the whole Deca.
It is day 3 of the Deca, 6:36 a.m. James is well and truly on the swim now. He's probably about nearly halfway through. We had a bit of a problem last night. We were a team of 3 up until last night. Matt Waterfield, Matt Bagshaw and myself. Matt Waterfield was taking the lead with sleeping with James, massaging him, looking after him at the beginning of the day and then at the end of the day, and me and Matt were sort of filling him in between. Now, there are a lot of risks when you, in the current climate, and a lot of risks when you go away as a group. Disease and infection has been a constant worry of ours, particularly COVID. Now, we've taken every precaution that we can. We've all tested before we've come. We've got hand gels. We're trying to operate as safely as we can, but we can't get away from the fact that we are linking in with each other, and we have to go to shops and stuff, and we're having to come into contact with people here. And unfortunately, we've been really unlucky that Matt Waterfield has tested positive. So yesterday he went for a nap. I woke up with a bit of a sore throat. We'd had the air conditioner on quite a lot, so he thought it might have been that. But he said, you know what, I'm just going to do a test just to be sure. He did a test and it was positive. And this was when James had about 3 or 4 miles left on the run, so of course we weren't going to tell him when he was on the run, and we were discussing what we think was the suitable thing to do. Now, I think really there was only one option, wasn't there, that Matt had to leave, and the rest of us did a test. Now, Matt Bagshaw and I are negative and are absolutely fine. We feel spot on. So we're going to continue as normal. We're going to try and limit our interaction with James. So although I slept in the awning and he's in his van last night, he had his van door closed, so we weren't breathing the same air. And I'm trying to use good hand hygiene at all times, and I'm going to retest again at some point today, but we feel absolutely fine. That's really thrown a spanner in the works. We were a team of 3, now we're a team of 2. We've got people coming to help us throughout. We had Sam from Total Endurance Nutrition, and now Jen and Harvey, but they're new to it today, so I'm not going to ask them to go and do washing up and stuff like that. So we've had to really pull together, but Matt's given some great direction. He's the crew lead, so whilst I have my own opinions about what should have happened about the COVID process yesterday, his decision is final. Like, we need to have a hierarchy in this sort of thing, otherwise we end up just falling out. So I respect his decisions, and he did a great job in telling me what to do and organising us. So we're going to get through it. we also have to be really conscious to put a really brave face on in front of James. We can't sit in front of him and be like, oh, I don't know how we're going to do this, don't know how I'm going to do that. When he woke up this morning, I said to him, James, me and Matt have had a good chat. We're going to nail today. Don't you worry about a thing, because he needs to not be concerned at all. He needs to focus on his performance. So yeah, spanner in the works. I was expecting something to come up at some point. If I'm honest, I don't think this had happened, but we moved, don't we?
It was the day that I started to notice the cold in the water. So we started to put warm water down the front of the wetsuit, which makes a difference. And but despite that, it was the worst swim ever. So during lap 1 of the swim was a 10-lap swim. During lap 1 of the swim, I was physically sick, not just sick in my mouth. I was actually had to stop swimming and was really sick. And then also during that swim, I had very, very bad GI issues. And for the more sensitive viewers, please stop listening now. But I had an accident in my suit that was quite a serious accident about halfway around the swim. I couldn't do anything about it. And I completed the swim, and then I went with my friend Matt Bagshaw. He helped sort me out in the shower before I went up to T1 to get ready for the bike, but I was pretty ill. I'm certain that this was to do with the amount of fat that I'd consumed the night before that my body had refused to digest, and then everything that I'd had in the morning sat on top of that, and that was what came out when I was sick. And I think it was also that caused the other end issue as well. Just after I'd been sick, I think my body thought we need to evacuate everything that we've got in here. Obviously that made the bike pretty difficult as well. I was very, very flat, quiet, which is unlike me, as anybody who watches this channel knows. And it was a very difficult day. This is where having total endurance nutrition in general, but specifically, in my opinion, Harvey and Jen from Total Endurance Nutrition there literally changed my race. My mood was terrible, I was very low, and through excellent nutritional advice and offerings, but also professional and calm attitude, but also more importantly, on a personal note, compassionate attitude, Harvey and Jen literally turned my race around. I would have struggled to have completed today if they hadn't made sure that I got all the nutrients that I needed. And what this did is this built a trust between myself and them. Not a sort of blind trust, so it wasn't as if it was going to be that anything they gave me I would have thought was the right thing. It was more of a two-way street, so I trusted that they would listen to what I would say and take that on board in their decision-making process, and it just built a very, very strong bond, and I will be eternally grateful to them for this. Other things about today, because obviously I started to improve after the nutrition got right. It's a boost being on course with such inspiring athletes as I was on course with. So the people doing the continuous, by today on the bike, they looked as if they were in a world of hurt, and yet they kept going. My fellow competitors in the 1 a day, they all kept going. And some of them, it was by day 3 I was starting to notice that there was a chap there called Ali, and Ali was not an accomplished swimmer, and he hadn't done a vast amount of mileage on the bike. He was a fabulous runner, by the way, but he was grueling it out on the bike, and seeing how difficult it was for him and seeing that he just kept going meant that I didn't have an excuse, so I had to keep going too. So the fellow competitors had really started to make a difference to me. It finished in just over 15 and a half hours, and that was the toughest day by far. My support crew just got me through it, so thank you. Okay, day 4. I think the most amazing thing about doing a Deca is how much you recover with a terrible night's sleep between Ironman. The sleep is awful. You are having night sweats. You're not sleeping for very long, although I was quite fortunate because I was managing to hold the times together, so I was getting in bed at a semi-reasonable time. But I mean, I was waking up drenched in sweat at least 3 or 4 times a night and having to change my clothing and all my bedding. So you don't sleep very well. However, and when you wake up you feel terrible, but you feel, I would say, at least 80% better than when you went to bed. Now, how on earth that is possible, I have no idea. I think that just goes to show how amazing the human body is. So yeah, make of that what you will. But it was a fact throughout the whole Deca, and I think also was borne out by the other people taking part as well. You know, they were all on that start line, so they must have recovered from the day before. But how humans do that, I don't know, but we do. This was the day that I got a valuable piece of advice from Dave Clamp, one of my fellow competitors and a bit of a hero of mine. He said, if you get through day 4, you will finish, except if you get an injury or a severe illness. And I thought, right, I best finish day 4 then, and then at least I can finish. The swim again felt slow. I think I swam in 1:35 today, but I wasn't sick. I didn't have an accident in the wetsuit, so it was a good day getting out of the lake, and I think Matt Bagshaw was even more relieved when I got out of the lake. The very first things out of his mouth were, do you need to go and have a shower first? And when I said I didn't, I felt really proud of myself, and I think he was really pleased. This was also a day where I realised that the kit prep that I'd done previous to the event made a difference. So all of my clothing was bagged up in individual days. So I had a day 1 swim kit, a day 1 bike kit, a day 1 run kit for every day, and that made a difference. It just made it so simple for the crew. So if the weather was bad, they'd have wet weather gear in a bag that was labelled up. And this was something that I learnt from doing the Triple Brutal, because I wanted to change kit, and my kit had been left against the side of the tent and had got wet through, and I didn't want that to happen again. So I prepared all of my kit beforehand, and that's a tip for anybody, I think, doing these sorts of races. Get ready beforehand. And just to give you an example of the level of care that a support crew give an athlete, part of my nutrition was a bacon cob chopped into dainty little pieces by my support crew, but they were buying this from the local cafe, where for some reason they refused to do the bacon well done, which is how I like my bacon. So the support crew were buying the bacon sandwich and then extra grilling the bacon. Obviously I wasn't aware of this at the time, but extra grilling the bacon so that I could have it how I wanted it. Now, that sounds like a silly thing, but it isn't. During one of these races where you are investing everything you have got, part of that and being able to do that is that the people who are there to support you do the same. They invest everything in you, and again, that's why it's hard to actually show enough appreciation for the people that are there doing it with you, because, you know, they even cook your bacon for you. Everybody works so hard in the support crew, and they have to, and the reason why they have to is because this was the day that we started to, I don't know if I was aware of it, maybe I was, I certainly am now when I look back, but the cognitive load was getting too big for my brain to deal with. So I was starting to forget things, and it almost had to be as if it wasn't my job to think anymore, because I wasn't able to do it very well. So that put even more pressure on the support crew. They had to do the thinking for me, but it was becoming just too much for me to think of everything, so I had to let that go. Today the bike actually started to feel slightly better. 118 miles is a long way, but anybody who does a lot of cycling will know that when you're sort of 3 or 4 days into lots of riding, your legs sort of come back to you, and today I'd started to notice that my legs were feeling a bit better on the bike. I was still managing to keep running deep into the marathon or ultra run section at the end, and again that was keeping my time something reasonable. I'd sort of decided I couldn't afford to walk until the end. You know, I walked a couple of laps with sticks usually at the end to help my recovery, which made a big difference, but I couldn't afford to walk earlier. I needed to get to bed, I was tired. Also continuing today was the pain had started in my left quad. This is day 4. It was just a mild pain to start with. This was also the day that I insisted that I had run an extra lap. Now, I understand nobody believing an athlete who's saying that they are running an extra lap when they are absolutely exhausted. But I knew. The reason why I knew is that I couldn't afford to allow myself to think that I'd run an extra lap if I hadn't, because it would have crushed me. And so the only reason I was saying that I ran an extra lap was because I was absolutely 100% certain that I had. Everybody checked, and apparently I hadn't, but timings and then subsequent evidence later proved that I had, because the start point of the run had changed how you cross over the timing mat, and I didn't cross over the timing mat on the start of my run. This was put right straight away by the event and the timing people, so they basically knocked me the average time off of 1 lap. I didn't get the recovery time back, but I was fine with that, really, to be perfectly honest. But at the end of today, which was a long day, 16 hours and 18 minutes, I was suffering, and I was really, as soon as I'd finished, I became quite unwell on my way to the shower block. So I'd started to shake uncontrollably and struggle to walk, and I had to be assisted by the crew into the shower block. Possibly I would have thought frightening for them, not frightening for me. I knew that I was okay really, but not a nice place to be at the end of day 4. Day 5, was it my favourite day? It was one of them. So this was Super Simpson Saturday. So my hometown had decided to put on an event in the local park while I was to celebrate the halfway point of my DECA attempt, because I was raising money for my hometown. I knew this, I was very aware of it, and it felt really good. The day started by waking up after the worst night sweats ever. So the night before, I had literally had to change clothing and bedding, I don't even know, but more than 5 times. And when I talk about, you know when people say, oh, I woke up drenched in sweat, you didn't. I now know what drenched in sweat really is. I was literally lying in a puddle of sweat. It was horrendous. But Super Simpson Saturday made me very motivated, and I had what felt like a good swim. I don't actually know what the time was, but it felt better, and that made a difference. My wife was there today. Kate came up today, and that made an enormous difference. It was just so nice to see her. And this was the start, I think, of a several-day purple patch. It's not so much that the performance itself today was outstanding, but it was just the beginning of me feeling good. I had lots of friends there. Lee Tunnicliffe had come up, who is basically my trifle dealer, and he brought lots of trifle up, which is always good. Jake, my mate, was there, who had ridden across the United States of America on a bicycle. I mean, how motivating is that to have somebody like that there? Everything seemed to go right. I really noticed how good a job Matt was doing on my bike every day. It felt like it was just running perfectly, which made the day feel really good. My stomach felt much better today after the nightmare of day 4. The nutrition we seemed to be on top of. Other competitors were mega inspiring. So Darcy, who did the event, he was raising money for endopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is a lung disorder that his dad had tragically passed away from, and he was raising money for a doctor and a nurse, Andrew and Heather, in a very small department in Scotland who helped people with this disorder. And just hearing about that just it makes you realise that you can't let these people down. You know, it started to feel like everybody on course was moving towards a common goal, and so you just wanted to give your best for yourself, but for everybody else on course as well as your crew. So it just felt like the motivation had gone up a notch today. Everything felt better. Ross from Elliott Carpets, the title sponsor of my whole attempt, was up there, you know, and it sort of dawned on me that, you know, he'd sponsored my event at great cost to himself and his company with the prospect of no real gain. You know, he did it because he wanted me to be able to do what I wanted to do, and it all started to feel like everything was lining up today, which I know sounds crazy, but I was tired. That's my only excuse, but that is what started to happen. Even the fact that today we discovered that I had done an extra lap the day before and they were going to amend the time, even that felt good. It felt like a wrong had been righted. So it was, you know, it was really good that, you know, it wasn't my fault. It was just one of those things. And so that all felt like a motivator. And although I was very tired, I felt like I was on the right track all of a sudden. Day 5 was a turnaround. We started to ice my feet at night. And I don't, you know, did that make any difference? It made difference in here. You know, all of a sudden I felt as if I was caring for my sore feet better, which, you know, made me feel good. The blisters that I'd got, which I was very fortunate because I prepared my feet beforehand, I didn't have very many blisters, but they started to just not bother me as much. That day I finished in 15 hours 22 minutes, so it wasn't as long as the day before, so everything felt like it had righted itself. And like I say, this was the beginning of what I would consider to be a purple patch during my DECA attempt. Right, day 6. Spirits were high, definitely. I'd had a good day 5. This was the day that, so small things that make a difference, I ought to tell you about them. It's weird because it's the smaller things that seem to amalgamate to make the biggest difference in a DECA rather than the big things. And I think it's because the big things are already in place. If you're organised, you've got your crew, you've got your stuff, you know what you're doing. But the smaller things make a big difference. So Dan today changed my bike computer display, so we took the total time off, so all I had was distance, power and heart rate. Made a massive difference. I was no longer thinking, my god, I've been on the bike 5 hours, because I couldn't see it. All I could see was, oh brilliant, I've done 70 mile. So that made a massive difference. Ash Turner, swim coach Ash, was there today, and he believed in me from day one. He was one of the first people to put really quite a large donation on the Just Giving page way before I even started, and having him there made a real difference to me. So right from the beginning I thought day 6 was going to be a good day. The bike was windy, but I was still in a purple patch. The legs felt good, so didn't really make any difference. I started to go to the toilet on the bike rather than stopping, and this did a couple of different things. One is it made it feel like you were racing, which stopped the boredom, but 2 is it helped alleviate the GI issues that I was having. I think holding my bladder was causing problems with the rest of my stomach. The reason today why I didn't want to get off the bike was that I wanted the person that was in the overall lead to see me on the road. So I didn't want to miss him as we were passing each other while I was in the toilet. I don't know why I wanted that, but I did. My legs felt good. I wasn't bothered at all about time gaps. So although I didn't know anything about placings, I'd sort of worked out in my head that I was doing okay, and that I knew inside myself that I was feeling strong. So I knew that the opportunity to do as well as I possibly could in the race would present itself. I knew it wasn't now, but I knew that anything I did now would make a difference to when that opportunity might present itself. So I was aware that I was in a race, I guess. I also knew that if I only rode my race and ran my race, that if other competitors were no longer running their own race, that would negatively impact on them, and that would improve my position in the race. Not that I really cared where I finished, but like I say, what I do care about is whether I do my best. And obviously part of doing your best is finishing as high up as you are able, I guess. Interestingly today, I think this is the most difficult thing to talk about, because obviously I don't want to appear ungrateful, and I think that everybody who had anything to do with me during the DECA, so all of my support crew, know that I am eternally grateful for what they did and couldn't have done it without them. But this was the day when the frustrations with the support crew started to begin inside me. Now, I know that they were completely unjustified. I'm not in any way trying to justify them. They are completely unjustified. But it's important to acknowledge what feelings were actually there, and they were there. So that's why I'm mentioning it. So it felt as if I was scheming about racing, and the support crew weren't on the same page. Now the truth is that they shouldn't have been, because they didn't know I was scheming about racing, and from the outside I'm pretty sure that my scheming about racing didn't make any physical difference in the world for them to actually see. So, but again, you're not thinking straight on day 6 of a DECA, so that's my excuse, I guess. Again, the positives continued, so T2 was again unrivaled, and again that's my support crew hurrying me through that as quickly as they can. I was still running well into the marathon, which made a very, very big difference, and I knew how important that was because of Big Paul telling me it was all those years ago. I was now, I'm going to say it, I was racing, which sounds ridiculous on an event that you've got every chance of not finishing, and the justification for thinking I was now racing was that I was bored, and thinking about racing filled some of that time on the bike, particularly when you're on your own. The level of support that I was receiving was astronomical, both from the people that were physically at the event, but also online, all the comments on Dan's YouTube channel, all of the comments on the Just Giving page, all of the messages I was receiving on my phone, which I looked at for 10 minutes before I went to sleep. Because the level of support was so big, it provided so much motivation that if an opportunity arose, I needed to take it or I would never forgive myself. Now, you don't get many chances in a race like this, and it wasn't yet, but I was aware that it might come. And I finished that day in 15 hours, 16 minutes. Day 7, bad weather. That's the sort of highlight of today. People are always saying about me, people that know me, like Dan for example, they always say that I like to see other people suffering. I'll be honest, when people say that, I smile, but I think actually it bothers me because that's not my nature, and I started to think about whether I do or not. And I've thought about it quite seriously, and I think the truth is that it's not that I like to see people suffering. And when I smirk when somebody tells me that somebody's suffering, it's more a shorthand, I think, for me saying when my competitors are finding it tough, I am also finding it tough. And that's a good thing, because when I'm finding it tough, it means I'm giving almost everything that I've got. And it's that satisfies me the most. So I can't control what other people are doing and how they're feeling, but I can control how I feel. And if I am working really hard and I'm finding things tough, that means that I'm doing all I can to get my performance out. And so I think it's more other people finding things tough is a symbol that I am working hard, and that's a good thing. I've tried to rationalise it to myself, but I do think that is what it means. Day 7 was a weird day, so this is the day that I dropped my goggles in the lake. But again, this is another metaphor for what it takes to do well in a Deca. I dropped my goggles at the swim start. There was absolutely no panic. We had a spare set of goggles that I'd already tested that were as good as the set of goggles that I dropped. Dan brought them straight to me, threw them to me, I put them on, carried on with my swim. That's how you make a Deca doable. You have everything that you can think about in place beforehand, and it makes things easier. It was a quicker swim today, which felt good. Again, I'd been sort of disappointed with my swims for a few days, and all of a sudden it was snowballing and things were starting to get better. This was also the day that I spoke to Total Endurance Nutrition about the hydration issue. So I'd noticed that I was sweating a lot at night and drinking some hydration fluid at night and hydration fluid in the morning, but I noticed that I was weeing excessively in the swim and also excessively, in my opinion, on the first half of the bike. And subsequently we changed the hydration fluid that I was having, and that seemed to make things a little bit better, although it didn't solve it. But I think this might just be a funny physical quirk of doing a Deca maybe, but it just goes to show that there are all sorts of things to overcome when you're doing an event like this. Today on the bike was it was a normal day, apart from about half an hour of it, which was exciting from where I was, but I don't think anybody else even noticed. So basically it was a headwind day today, quite probably the strongest all-round headwind, and I noticed that you were never really going to be able to get away from somebody that was in a pace line with you. But I noticed that there was some traffic lights on course, so you either got caught in the traffic lights or you didn't, but they provided a very natural break for being able to get away from somebody if you were one side of the lights and they were caught at the other side of the lights. So in my head I'd created this plan where I wanted to get out of sight on the bike and maybe put some time into my competitors. The opportunity presented itself and I came rushing into the turnaround area, demanding some carb mix from my support crew and then rushing straight out again, and what happened was the plan that I'd put into action didn't work. So I didn't get away from a competitor that was in a pace line with me, and that was fine. I just accepted that, but I saw an opportunity and I just tried to go for it. This would be another example of where inside it felt as if the crew weren't on the same page as I am. Now again, I gave them absolutely no warning, I didn't explain anything about it, but I think this goes to show how your internal monologue can vary from reality, I guess, which is an interesting quirk. And that's why I think you've got to have a crew that actually care about you enough so that they don't get too cross at you when you're being a bit of a git, I suppose. There's reasons why I was acting the way that I was acting. Not necessarily good reasons, but there was reasons. But yeah, just another example of the strength of the crew and their commitment to supporting me. Okay, so we're on to the run. And I think today I had a 1 lap lead on the person in second place overall starting the run. Now that's nothing because Dave had been running faster than me, I think almost every preceding day, but again I was in that sort of racing mindset, and so what I wanted to do is I wanted to run my race, and if I could run my race and at the same time encourage Dave to run my race rather than his own, that would probably be to my benefit. So what I intended to do was to remain ahead of him until I walked the last couple of laps at the end. And that's what I did. Now I know that my support crew thought that what I was trying to do was to drop the person who was shadowing me. But actually the opposite was true. What I wanted to do is to run at the top end of my safe pace, hoping that the person in second would have to run maybe above their safe pace to hold that distance. I didn't know whether that was happening, but I took a gamble that running at the top end of my safe pace would be safe. It meant that my intensity was higher, and again I think that the crew had misread what I were doing, and they were quite clear in telling me that they thought I was doing the wrong thing. This I found really frustrating because I felt like I knew what I was doing and I couldn't understand why they couldn't see what I was doing. Now, I didn't explain any of this, and if circumstances had turned out different, they'd have been right and I'd have been wrong. So it's difficult not to sound as if you're just backing yourself, but I thought I knew what I was doing. So I knew I was working hard, but I knew I was working hard but within myself, and I hoped that the person that I was racing with, obviously they presumably didn't even know they were in a race, so most of this is just happening inside my head, hoping that that would negatively impact on him for following days. Finished that day in just under 15 hours, 14:49, which again shows that obviously I ran a little bit harder, but I really felt at the end of the day, when I walked the last couple of laps and Dave passed me to go on and win the day, I really felt like I had done the right thing and that it would give me opportunities in future days. Okay, day 8. I think the best quote of day 8 comes from Matt Bagshaw's little girl Tabby, who said, "Don't die just yet." And that's basically how it felt. It felt as if we had done lots and lots and lots, but there was still quite a lot to do. But I felt good going into day 8. I'd already, as soon as I woke up, I'd made a decision that I wanted to be first out of the swim. Now, wanting to be first out of the swim and being first out of the swim are two different things, and I had no evidence really that that was even possible, because there were clearly some stronger swimmers than me, but that was the mindset that I walked to the lake that morning with. I wanted to get out of the lake first, get out on the bike and get out of sight, because I knew once I was out of sight on the bike, I could ride my own race and people might forget about me. So that's what I did. I could tell this was the day that Total Endurance Nutrition had abandoned me. I'm kidding. They had to go to a previous engagement. So I knew that the crew were nervous about that. And I think the truth was that I was nervous about it too, because I built such a strong bond with Jen and Harvey. But that wasn't going to alter what I was going to do that day, because you have to just commit to what you're going to do, don't you? So basically I got out of the swim first, got on the bike and got gone. I'd already started to wee on the bike because that was really helping with my stomach issues. And today I was racing, and I felt like the crew needed to keep up with me. There's no reason why the crew should know that I was racing. I'd not said it. There was no outward, because the speeds don't really alter too much either, so there's not even any outward sign that it's happening. But again, this is just to explain how difficult it is to align your inner monologue with what's actually happening out there. So I was basically looking for an opportunity today, and I rode hard today, or harder. I think my watts went up probably 5 watts on the day before, which had gone up 5 watts on the day before that as well. So I rode harder, and I got off the bike with an 18-minute lead, and then also got some laps in while my competitors were in T2 as well. So I was running well, and I knew that this was my opportunity, and I really knew it was my opportunity when I lapped the person in second place on the run. And so I'm having been in that position before where you're having a bad day, I knew that today was the day where I could make up the substantial deficit I had in the overall. So as my competitors were finding things tough, I poured everything into today, both on the bike but particularly on the run. And I knew with absolute certainty that today was the day. Now, it left me in a bit of an uncomfortable position because throughout all of my athletic career, if that's what we're going to call it, I am a perennial finisher. Usually the most important thing to me is getting to the end of an event, and that is still true. But by this stage, I'd pretty much worked out that I could probably get to the end of day 10, but I had an opportunity to actually win an event, which has never really presented itself to me in the past. I knew that the risk to me was that it didn't work and I'd look like a fool, but I'd still be able to finish the event, and I decided that that was okay by me and that I ought to have a go because of all the support that I got. I was aware that yesterday, day 7, was the day that set this up, so I poured it on in the run. This meant my intensity was higher, which meant I was more stressed, which meant that I took it out on the crew more, which meant that this was the day of Cheesecake Gate. So what I learned is that as my intensity rose, still well within my safe zone, but rose to the top of it, what I could eat changed. Everything had to become softer, mushier, more sugary and easier to get in, which made this much more difficult on the crew. So, and it became, you know, so specific. So there was a difference between eating a trifle and eating a cheesecake. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I was absolutely giving my all at this stage, and again it made it very difficult for the crew, and I was unreasonable. I think the crew are okay with it, and I hope they are. I hope they know that it came from a stressed place, but it definitely made me more difficult to deal with. I just knew that I had to keep running, and all that was in my mind was push, 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 and that's what I did. I pushed as hard as I could, knowing that anybody who was finding it difficult would be getting spat out the back. At the same time, I was piling it on the front, and I finished that day in 14 hours and 11 minutes, which I would be very happy for a single Ironman, but to do that on day 8 made me incredibly happy. It came with some consequences, as you could imagine. So what it did is it made day 9 and 10 much more difficult than they had to be. What I did was I got all of the time back that I was behind in the overall, and I became overall leader. Day 9 really just, you know, it was a normal day. So the swim went well. I was fast on the bike. I even lapped the person who was in second place on the bike, which meant that I was putting more time into him, which made me feel more confident that I might win the overall. But it certainly came with consequences. So on the run, I started to have more severe pain in my left quad. In fact, I don't really get injured very often, and I don't really suffer too much with pain too much, but I would describe, particularly on the second half of the run, it was a 9 out of 10 pain in my left quad. I clearly put some sort of little tear into it or something, but I suffered around. I managed to concentrate, which again made it more difficult for the crew. Total Endurance Nutrition, Jen and Harvey were back, but it made it difficult for them because I was concentrating so much on dealing with the pain that I couldn't really eat everything that they were giving to me. But again, the magic of mashed potato with sugar and butter saved us again, just something that you can eat no matter how terrible you feel, apparently. But the story of day 9, I think, really was pain in my left quad. But we got to the end and we finished in 15 hours and 10 minutes. The last day. You would think that the last day came with a feeling of relief, but it didn't. Day 10 was as hard as any preceding day, really, and in some ways it was alien to me because I'd never led a race going into the last day. So it was tough mentally. It was tough mentally to know how to do it. This was the day that the fundraising went ballistic, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dan, TriathlonDan, for the work that he put in, him personally, put in on day 10 to give the fundraising an extra kick. And this is where it got to truly crazy levels. I think by the end of today we'd hit something like, I don't know, where did we hit, like £11,500 by the end of day 10, something like that, which is insane. And part of that is down to the fact that Dan is incredibly hard working, coupled with totally shameless, which lots of people might use that as a criticism, but I'm not. I am using it in an absolutely in awe way of Dan's ability to focus on needing to do something for his mate and then doing it. He rang everybody. I think from everybody he knew in triathlon to his fishmonger to the person that let out the waistband on his trousers after all his trifles and bowls of porridge. And what he did was amazing, and everybody in my hometown of Alfreton will benefit from that. So thank you very much, Dan. Like I say, the last day was tough mentally. The bike, I was in extreme pain in my left leg. So running the day before with a painful quad had led me to overcompensate, and my left hamstring was also hurting. And on the bike, it was probably the most pain I've ever felt while exercising. It was making me white, it was making me feel very, very sick, but I knew I couldn't stop. This is when we started more seriously with pain relief medication. The day before, I'd had some ibuprofen while I was running, only a small amount, and then I just focused and got through it. But today on the bike we started to have a little bit more, so we alternated between ibuprofen and paracetamol. That helped on the bike, and it got me through the bike and got me to start the run. But as soon as I started the run, I was in a great deal of pain, and I wanted some strapping on my leg to help that, much to the amusement of my support crew. I went to the physio in the tent, and they put on some of that stretchy kinesiology tape, which everybody tells me is completely useless and just a placebo. But I will remind everybody that the placebo effect is an effect. It didn't help at all with the quad, but I would say that it probably helped slightly with my hamstring. Although it wasn't what I actually envisioned when I asked for strapping. I thought I was going to get some sort of athletic strapping with zinc oxide tape or something that might help. But, you know, we just got on with it basically. The pain relief helped a great deal, but there was a large cost, which was, it would seem internally, because there's no way of measuring this, it would seem as if I was eating the correct things, but my body wasn't digesting them properly, and I had a definite bonk on the run. I told Total Endurance Nutrition, and we quickly switched to sugars, things like Lucozade drinks, holding that in my mouth to stimulate my body to know that we were absorbing sugars, and we got through it, and we finished the whole thing. The last lap of a Deca is very weird. So you run the last lap of a Deca in reverse so that you can say whatever you need to say to your fellow Deca athletes who are still on course. I chose to do the lap on my own rather than with my support crew. This wasn't an ego thing or anything like that. It was mainly to do with the fact that by now I'd realised that the level of kindness, compassion, friendship, support that I'd received from everybody there, my support crew and whatnot, but also from home, had started to overwhelm me slightly. And I took the last lap as an opportunity to try to relax my mind and come to terms with the uncomfortable feeling of everybody saying well done me, which doesn't sit very nice with me for some reason. And so I walked it on my own, said well done to all of my competitors, and then met my full support crew at the finish line, which I'm sure Dan will put some footage in now. How happy was I when I crossed the line? Difficult to put into words. I mean, there is an enormous amount of relief that you made it. I felt absolutely incredible and flabbergasted that I'd won it. But having everybody there made me feel terrific. And I would say to anybody who's thinking about doing anything that's really difficult, I would say that the end can make it all worthwhile. So I'd just like to thank everybody for all the help that everybody gave me. Sorry for boring you with this incredibly long story. But yeah, that was about the time I won the Deca.
Tell us about your music playlist. What were you listening to throughout the week?
Okay, this seems to be a really popular question. My playlist is 8.75 marathons long, it turns out. And what I do is I just add things to it as random when I hear them or remember them. And it all tends to be quite upbeat. And I wrote down a few because the mix is pretty eclectic. So please don't judge me. So Leonard Skinner, Freebird, Limp Bizkit, Break Stuff, Rebel MC, Street Tough, Bjork, the Fluke remix of Big Time Sensuality, CLS, Can You Feel It, KDA, Turn the Music Louder, Marilyn Manson, Beautiful People, or really random stuff. So the theme from Only Fools and Horses, the theme from Van der Valk, and the theme from Banana Splits.
Is there anything or one main thing that you would do differently if you were to do the event again?
Wow. Yes. My training, which went excellently, would be quite a bit more specific on the bike. And also I would train to swim harder.
How many calories were you firstly eating per day and secondly burning per day?
Mixed information on this. I think that I think that eating and ingoings and outgoings were roughly balanced all the way through, because I only lost, I think, 1.5 kilos, and I think I actually lost that on the last couple of days. So I maintained my weight basically all the way through until the very end. I think that I was consuming 8,000 calories, 2,000 of those were living expenses and 6,000 burnt on the race. But I think you think it was 6,000 in total.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I haven't seen the data, it's just what I think.
We're waiting for 10 to digest it as well as Garmin.
Right, okay.
What was the darkest moment and what pulled you through?
That's really tough. There were a few, so I don't think I can distinguish from them, so I think I'm going to list them. Day 10 on the bike was exceptionally painful, and pain relief got me through. Day 3, nutritionally, until halfway through the bike, was very, very dark, and total endurance nutrition got me through. And last but definitely not least, you could very, very, very easily be overwhelmed by how big the task is ahead of you, and the care and compassion that my friends showed me stopped me getting overwhelmed.
How do you stay so positive when things are so tough?
I was taught that a very important thing a long time ago was cheerfulness in the face of adversity, and I try to follow that as best I can, because if you are finding things really tough, being down about it doesn't actually help, but being cheerful, having a cheerful disposition does help. So it's a practical thing.
How did you feel the organisers supported the athletes, good and bad?
I cannot really sing Brutal events praises enough. They are easygoing, they are very organised. At all times I felt safe. They have a very good medical team. The timing people are excellent. They're all normal people, which is important to me. I always felt safe on the lake. There was lots and lots of paddleboards and canoes out there to help your kayakers and whatnot. They've done it, haven't they? James and Claire have done these events. They know how dangerous they can be, and so they support you. Yeah, in fact, I'm not actually sure I can say anything negative about them.
A lot of questions about your undercarriage. You didn't really have any issues. What is that?
Yeah, so bib shorts that are comfortable. You don't even have to have very expensive ones. Mainly I use the club bib shorts, but I also always use Noxema, which is a type of, it's a bit like Pond's cream that old ladies put on their face. A pro I was watching on a podcast a couple of years ago suggested it, and I use it every time I got on a bike. Not only does it work as a chamois cream, but it also cleans that area continuously, which I think stops you getting saddle sores.
James, I think the most common question is, what on earth is next?
Okay, yeah, so I need to rest and recover. Physically, obviously, my quad is hurting a little bit, but more importantly, mentally, I think. I definitely finished the race, and in the subsequent days afterwards, feeling overwhelmed by the level of support and positivity that I received. It's not natural, is it, for somebody to experience that amount of love in such a condensed amount of time? And so that left me feeling, I don't know, maybe it's a man thing, I'm not sure, like uncomfortable about it, but so I need to deal with that. And then the first priority is I am supporting my wife Kate on the Haute Route, which is a race from Nice to Megève near de Geneva through the Alps, a bicycle race. So I'm really excited about that. So I'm going to be in the van driving next to a Pippin, shouting out the windows all the good stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then I need to talk to my wife about what we might like to do in the future. We'll probably do a couple of ultra races together. I know that she's talked about doing a race called the Wanna, which is an event that Brutal Events put on the Jurassic Coast. It's a 80-something mile trail run, and it's called the Wanna because you only ever want to do it once, apparently. And then after that, who knows? I mean, maybe you should put in the comments what you think I should have a go at below. Look at me pointing like a YouTube pro. Who knows? There are... the priority of how I select races are ones that I don't think I can do, because that's really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a race that I can't do. So we'll have a look and see what we can find.